What would you do if a police officer pulled you aside, not in the middle of a crime, but in the middle of your ordinary life and said, "You need to come with me"? No explanation. No badge flash. Just a quiet urgency in his voice and a look that made your heart skip a beat. That's exactly what happened to me one humid Thursday night at a gas station, with a half-open soda in my hand and a text from my fiancé still unread on my phone. I hadn't broken a single law. I wasn't drunk, high, or causing trouble. But something in the way he looked at me told me this wasn't about justice or protocol. It was personal, intimate, dangerous maybe, but not in the way you'd think. By the time I realized what he really wanted, it wasn't fear I felt. It was recognition. Like I'd already known where this was going all along. My name is Elena Ramirez, 32 years old, born and raised in a quiet suburb just outside of Charleston, South Carolina. I work from home as a freelance graphic designer. Logos, packaging, some web design when the coffee kicks in. My days are mostly quiet, filled with deadlines, iced lattes, and a tab permanently open on Pinterest. I live with my fiancé, Peter, in a townhouse that smells like lavender and wood polish. He's a financial advisor, organized to a fault, with a color-coded sock drawer and a spreadsheet for everything, including our wedding budget. Peter is the kind of man you marry when you're tired of drama. Safe, steady, reliable. He makes dinner every Sunday night, always remembers our anniversary, and kisses my forehead before bed. And maybe that's why I felt so guilty the first time I noticed Cade. Officer Cade Bennett. 6 foot something with a jawline carved like someone sculpted it out of quiet authority. He pulled me over 6 months ago for a broken taillight. That's how it started. Routine stop. But when he walked up to my car, flashlight cutting through the night, and our eyes met, something shifted. Not in the air but in me. He didn't flirt. Didn't even linger. Just handed me a warning and walked back to his cruiser like nothing happened. But I sat there for 5 full minutes afterward, my hands trembling on the steering wheel, wondering what the hell had just happened. Over the next few months I saw him again. Too many times to be coincidence. At the local diner picking up coffee. At the gym, late at night when I usually had the place to myself. Once at a grocery store on a Tuesday morning. His cart filled with protein bars and black coffee. We'd nod. Sometimes exchange a polite hey. But never more. Still, every time I saw him, something in me stirred like an old song I'd forgotten the lyrics to. I told myself it was harmless. Just attraction. Crush maybe. The kind of thing you grow out of when you remember the person you're supposed to be. But the truth was, I started looking for him. Going for walks near the station. Changing my gym schedule. Adding errands I didn't need to run. And I think he noticed. Because the night at the gas station, when he walked up to me in civilian clothes and said, "You need to come with me," he didn't sound like a stranger or even a cop. He sounded like someone who had been waiting for me to stop pretending. It wasn't loud. There were no flashing lights. Just a hum of fluorescent bulbs, the smell of spilled gasoline, and a silence between us so thick it felt like confession. I sat in his truck, my seatbelt still unbuckled, fingers fidgeting with the hem of my sweater. The night outside the windshield was impossibly dark, only broken by the occasional flash of streetlights. I should have asked more questions. I should have demanded answers. Instead I stared straight ahead, my throat tight. "You're quiet," Cade said, his voice low, steady. "I'm trying to figure out if this is kidnapping," I muttered, forcing a nervous laugh. He didn't laugh back. "You followed me. No cuffs, no threats. That says something." I turned to him, my pulse quickening. "What does it say?" He glanced over, one hand resting lightly on the steering wheel. "That you want to know what this is just as badly as I do." I didn't respond. I didn't have to. The silence spoke for me. 15 minutes later we pulled into his driveway. It was a modest house, tucked behind rows of pine trees, quiet and unassuming. A porch light flickered on as we stepped out, casting long shadows across the gravel. Inside it smelled like cedar and clean linen. Lived in but tidy. No pictures on the walls. No signs of anyone else. No woman's shoes by the door, no half-drunk wine glasses in the sink. Him. He poured 2 glasses of water and handed me one. "I'm not staying," I said, my voice firmer than I felt. "You already are," he replied, eyes locking with mine. "Cade." I started, but he cut me off gently. "Don't say it. Not yet. Just sit." I sat on the edge of his worn leather couch, back straight, legs crossed tightly at the ankles. I felt like a teenager sneaking into trouble she didn't fully understand. "This isn't you," I whispered, almost to myself. "What isn't?" "This. Me. Sitting here. In another man's house. At night. While my fiancé is at home thinking I'm grabbing snacks." He sat beside me, not too close, but close enough that I could feel the warmth of his body. "Maybe it is you. Just not the version of you you've been pretending to be." I stared at the glass in my hands, watching the water tremble from my grip. "Why now? Why tonight?" Cade leaned back, exhaling slowly. "Because I'm tired of pretending too. I see how you look at me. And every time I let you walk away, I feel like I'm letting something real disappear." My throat tightened. "Peter is a good man. I know. He loves me. I know that too. And I think I love him." Cade turned to me then, eyes serious, dark. "But you're not in love with him." I felt something inside me crack open. Something brittle I hadn't realized I was holding on to. A dam of excuses. Safe little lies. Plans built on silence. "I can't do this," I said, standing quickly. "I shouldn't have come. This was a mistake." He stood too, calm, not reaching for me. "Then why are you crying?" I hadn't noticed until he said it. But sure enough, tears had begun to gather in my eyes, blurring the edges of the room. "I don't know," I admitted. "I don't even know who I am right now." He stepped forward, slowly, like I was something fragile. "You're someone who's allowed to want more. You don't owe anyone your silence, Elena. Not even Peter." I sat back down, my knees weak. I hated that he saw me this clearly. Hated even more that he was right. "What happens if I walk out that door?" "Yes. You go back to your life. You keep pretending. And maybe it works. Maybe it doesn't. And if I stay?" He hesitated. "Then we both stop pretending." My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it echo in my ears. My palms were damp. Every instinct I had was pulling me in opposite directions. But under the fear there was something else. Relief. Because for the first time in years, I wasn't sleepwalking through my life. I was awake. Terrified, yes, but awake. And that's when I knew, whatever happened next, I could never go back to who I was before this night. We sat there in the stillness, the weight of everything unspoken pressing down between us. I could hear the soft tick of a wall clock, the distant rustle of wind through trees outside. It felt like we were suspended in time, like if we moved too quickly, we'd shatter something delicate and irreversible. "Cade," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "What are we even doing?" He turned toward me slowly. "You tell me." I opened my mouth, then closed it again. I didn't know how to explain the ache in my chest, or the way my hands kept trembling. I didn't know how to say that something about him made me feel more real than I had in years. And I certainly didn't know how to make sense of the fact that this moment, in a stranger's house, felt more honest than my entire engagement. "I think I was trying to live the life I thought I was supposed to have," I finally said. "Peter, he's perfect. Everyone loves him. My mom cried when I told her we were engaged. My friends were jealous. And for a while I believed it. That safety was enough. That love didn't have to feel like fire. And now?" Cade asked gently. "Now I feel like I've been numb," I admitted. "Like I built a whole life on what looked good in photos and what made sense on paper. And then you walked in with your silence and your steadiness and you shook something loose in me." He didn't smile. He just listened. And somehow that was worse because it meant he understood. "I've never cheated," I added quickly, like I needed him to know I hadn't crossed that line. "Not physically. Not until now. But emotionally. I've been somewhere else for a long time. Maybe longer than I realized." Cade stood up and walked across the room, running a hand through his hair. I didn't bring you here to ruin your life, Elena. I brought you here because I couldn't take it anymore, watching you wear a mask every time we passed each other. I wanted to give you space to feel it, to admit it. I swallowed hard. So what do we do now? He turned to me, and for the first time there was vulnerability in his eyes. That's not my decision. It's yours. You have to decide if the life you're in is truly yours, or just the one you settled for. Those words landed like a punch to the stomach. It wasn't about Cade. Not really. It wasn't even about Peter. It was about the version of myself I had been performing for so long that I no longer remembered what it felt like to want something. Not out of obligation or fear of judgment, but for myself. For the messy, reckless, painful truth of it. And standing there, in the dim light of a stranger's bedroom, I realized something devastating. I had spent years building a beautiful life I didn't fully belong to. I can't stay, I said, choking on the words. He nodded. I didn't expect you to. But I'm not going back the same. A silence stretched between us again, but this time it wasn't heavy. It was tender, full of understanding, full of endings. You never were the same, Cade said. You just finally stopped hiding. And with that I turned and walked out the door. Not because I didn't care, but because I finally did. When I got home, the house was dark. Peter had fallen asleep on the couch, the TV still glowing with muted late-night reruns. I stood there for a long moment just watching him. His face was so peaceful, untroubled. Familiar in the way a favorite sweater is. Soft, predictable, worn in all the right places. I didn't wake him. I slipped quietly into the bedroom, undressed, and sat on the edge of the bed, my thoughts unraveling like loose threads. It was strange. How one night could shift something so fundamental inside you. How the truth, once seen, can't be unseen. I didn't tell Peter everything. Not right away. But I did tell him I needed time. Not because I wanted to punish him. Not even because of Cade. I needed time because I realized I'd been living my life with the volume turned down. And I wanted to hear myself again. I wish I could tell you that things wrapped up neatly. That Peter and I parted as friends. That Cade and I became something beautiful and lasting. But life rarely moves in clean lines. Peter was hurt. Deeply. And maybe rightfully so. We tried to talk it out to patch the cracks, but the truth kept leaking through. We eventually ended the engagement. Not in bitterness, but in quiet, exhausted relief. As for Cade, we saw each other once more months later. At the same diner where it all began. He was sitting in his usual corner, nursing black coffee. He looked up, saw me and smiled. Small, knowing smile. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. The silence between us said everything we were too afraid to speak aloud. I don't regret what happened. I regret how long it took me to listen to myself. Sometimes, infidelity isn't about desire. It's about forgetting who you are, and then being reminded, unexpectedly, by someone who sees what you've tried to bury. And the truth is, the hardest betrayal isn't cheating on someone else. It's abandoning yourself. So if you're reading this and feel that ache, that quiet, nagging sense that something in your life doesn't quite fit, don't ignore it. That voice inside you. It's not doubt. It's a door.